Welcome to the Celebrate Moral Exemplars Podcast with Dan Osborne. We think of moral exemplars as ordinary people who have the moral will to do the right thing to improve the lives of others. They often do this by using their creativity, wisdom, and judgment to challenge rules and accepted practices. Each episode will provide you with insights into the motivations, sacrifices, and rewards that these amazing people experience. We also hope to plant a seed in your own mind and heart to perhaps consider one day, and in your own way, following the path of these moral exemplars. Now, here's Dan Osborne.
Welcome to the podcast. As you just heard, one of the focal points of this podcast is to bring you interviews with people who are blazing new trails and doing things in a different way for the purpose of helping others. Today's guest does exactly that almost every day of her life. She works in the public education system in Melbourne, Australia, as a consultant, working directly in the classroom with children. She uses her amazing skills and wisdom to engage students in different types of creative activities, such as drawing and writing. Now, she uses these activities as a vehicle to guide them along a path of self-awareness and discovery of their world. And her work often produces incredible changes in young people's lives. And that's why I wanted to have her on the podcast. The insights she will share today about connecting and building trust with others will be useful not only to teachers of children, but to all of us who understand the importance of good relationships to our own success and happiness. It's my pleasure to introduce Vicky Shukuroglou. Welcome to the podcast, Vicky.
Thanks, Dan. It's lovely to be here.
I'd like to start off by asking you how you think about your work. What do you believe is the essence of what you're doing?
I think love has a lot to do with it. Care for this planet and all living beings, and developing our curiosity, understanding, connection, knowing that we are capable, active humans.
By way of contrast, how does the education system see you?
Well, one colleague describes me as a platypus because it's a strange...
quite a contrast.
It is. It's a strange creature with a bill and swims in the water and does all of those things that we're not quite sure about.
Why do you think they refer to you as a platypus beside that?
Because there's not really a place that I fit because of the nature of the work, which steps beyond the expected norms. There's a sense that we can explore new worlds, and that doesn't seem to fit with the current educational system.
Can you explain a little bit about then how you go about being a platypus?
Well, I don't live in a burrow. One of the, I think, important things that I always hold is a really strong sense of trusting every child's capacity and innate sense that they want to participate and contribute and discover. And so as I begin to work with any of the children or the teachers, having a really powerful sense that they know that I am trusting them and that my expectations of them are just to be powerful in who they are with kindness is probably just the basic foundation for all the work.
So how did you arrive at this place in your career? Can you explain a bit about sort of the path that brought you to where you are now?
So years ago, I was asked to run arts-based workshops, but they were very skills-based, and it was fine, but not much heart. So slowly over time, I've just brought in my own creative practice ethos approach, which is, learning through creativity. So discovering through careful observation and exploration, experimentation through practice of, whether it's drawing or making or whatever it might be. And I guess I've just found ways to share that in a way that I can step back from the process while inviting everybody that I'm working with to participate in their own way. So it's really empowering their authorship and their sense-making through their creative practice. And it's a continual evolution for me. I'm always discovering and learning and reflecting. And it's just all a huge improvisation. There's no fixed plan. There's no method 1, method 2. It's all responsive.
What do you see as the biggest difference between what you're doing and what's usually offered by the education system?
I think that from what the children say, there's a sense of greater possibilities of discovery, of things being opened up, all their senses, who they are, all their human capacity as a live, capable human being with, senses that are often quietened down. They sort of grow into those, or they have them. They've always been there. They are always present. But it's just the way that they talk about it is as though they're unlocked and they find freedom and they find their strength. And I think through the educational system, there's a very different emphasis and not necessarily a powerful sense of authorship and owning your own learning and your own connection to the world.
How do you get them to do that? How do you get them to own their own learning?
I guess a lot of it is really supporting their bodies to be really open, to really absorb and be able to feel things and to be able to talk about feelings and to talk about their responses and to have that, to be able to identify when they feel alive and active and engaged, and when things are challenging. That is the point of learning. So when they're feeling a bit wobbly and a bit unsure about so much, that's excellent. I encourage that within them. And once they identify those things, once they have sensed that within their own bodies, the world opens up to them. And so through drawing, through talking, through being present in their bodies in different ways and connecting with everybody else in the group and in their community, their perspective just shifts. And I try and remove myself from it in the sense that I don't need to control the thing. It's not for me to tell them. I'm just there to support a particular journey that they write.
What have you found the role of their other classmates? What role do their other classmates play in each individual's learning?
A huge role. The way they talk about it is that it's incredibly empowering for them to see that there are multiple perspectives in the world, to see that in fact there's so much, like an incredible abundance within each individual, and to honour that and show regard for it. And they all just want to be seen for who they are, as does every human being. And when they understand that they can offer that to somebody, that they can bear witness to somebody's presence, they know how empowering that is, not only for the other person, but for themselves. And so on a really human level, it's incredibly important. But then they also find these beautiful ways to share their learning and their understanding. And I make sure that they read what they've written to the group, and that they develop this incredible love of language and ideas and questions. And so when they do that in their community of 20 kids or whatever it is, there's a whole lot of dynamic thinking going on. And they refer to each other and their thinking, and they build on each other's ideas, and they collaborate in ways that are profound, and they solve problems, really complex problems about relationships and conflict. They'll sit and try to work things out in beautiful ways that they haven't had the opportunity before.
Oh, okay. What sort of, can you give us an example of one problem they've sort of figured out amongst themselves? I'd love to hear what they came up with.
One group that I'm working with has become incredibly passionate about indigenous plants, and they want to plant a whole lot of, I guess, gardens in the school and to educate the community and to inform people about the importance of these plants. And they're just trying to find ways amongst themselves of how to create that, and how to, if somebody's writing a letter to someone, how can they all participate, have a voice, but also not work on the one thing for 20 hours as opposed to, to be efficient, but also powerful and effective and thorough and rigorous. And so there's a bit of conflict around that in terms of them trying to work those things out. So recently we sat in a big circle and had this incredibly powerful conversation where one of the girls sitting next to me said, we've never done this before. We don't know how to do these sorts of things. We don't know how to have these kinds of conversations. And so when they begin to listen to each other, they articulate what it is that they feel, what is happening for them, and finding new solutions. So they develop incredibly astute listening skills and can see how problems are easily solved usually if you can think creatively, if you can listen attentively, if you can do all of those things. Dramas are usually avoided.
Yeah. a lot of political leaders could learn.
I think so. A thing or two. Maybe I should join in.
What have you found to be the most surprising thing about working with these children?
Surprising. I think every day that I work with them is a surprise. I mean, I have enormous expectations of them as individuals. I don't ever doubt that they are extraordinary. But when I read what they write or see the images that they create or the ways that they relate to each other or themselves and the way they speak, it's just a joy,
Well, let's talk a little bit more about follow up on that a little bit on some of their writings. Now, you've told me about some exercises that you do with them, and then how you ask them to go and write about the exercise or what they were feeling from the exercise. And I think you had a couple that you wanted to share with us.
So I guess one of the really important things to bear in mind is that the whole process for me, in a sense, is an improvisation. So I don't go in on any set day with a particular plan. I come equipped with a whole lot of thinking and imagining and contemplating the possibilities, but never with a fixed plan. And when I first start working with a group, I ask them to write and draw in ways that might give me an idea of who they are and where they're at in themselves and in their expression of that. For example, here we have a young girl's first day where she wrote about a koala, and in point form she wrote that koalas climb trees, that they're usually brown or grey, they eat gum tree leaves, they have 4 paws and they're mammals.
Mm-hmm.
And so
hard to argue with any of that.
It's hard to argue with any of that, but it's terribly dull. And there's no life, there's none of her in that. Mm-hmm. She is not present. And so we have great conversations around, well, what is the purpose of doing anything if it's just a repetition? If we know what we're going to create before we've even done it, what is the value? What value does it bring, and what value are we giving? And so enormous conversations around the idea of challenging yourself and how to discover the things that you are not so sure about, and how to step into that space of discomfort, which is the space of learning. And so finding ways to bring the essence, I guess, of our world in all its incredibly multiple forms, and how everything is extraordinary. Absolutely everything in this world is extraordinary and connected. And how can we see that through a different lens and continually? So if we look at a koala, we can look at it 1 billion times, and each time we can look at it differently. And so through those conversations, they start questioning and thinking, and through the process of imagining and sensing differently. So we work a lot with blindfolds, or using our bodies in different ways, or connecting with other people in different ways. The world reveals itself, I guess, in different colours. And then words hold value with a greater curiosity. And so then she wrote
this
about
was after
koala.
these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
This is her koala after.
This is koala after some thoughtful
introspection.
Yes. She writes, the chilly wind was pulling back the grey-coloured fur of the exhausted koala. Sleepy and tired as it was, its movements were slower than a turtle. The sound of the rushing wind mixed with the sound of drifting leaves swaying with the wind was tickling the koala's ears like popping bubbles. Suddenly, a very weak branch hanging from the tree broke and fell. As it hit the ground, it made a loud crack. It made the leaves forming a colourful mat underneath the tree make a crunching noise. So there's life in here.
Yeah.
There's life.
And this girl is 8, 9 years old?
No, she's 11, I think 11 years old.
11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Still, that's incredible.
So, transformation is swift if we just unlock those certain things of saying we are alive, and so is this world. And how can we see it for what it is in its extraordinary complexity? So once that is opened, it's incredibly hard to lock it up again. You can't just put it back in the box. And from that point, they understand, they really sense that feeling of being bright and alert. And it's a powerful feeling for them, because that's who they are in essence. That's themselves, and that's their authorship. And so it just builds and builds and builds from that point. And so continually the conversations develop, and continually the things that we do develop in ways that build understanding of their thinking, of other people's thinking, of history, of cycles, of all of these systems that are not linear. And so imagination flourishes, and all sorts of other capacities flourish. So each time we might build on ideas, transform things through drawing, through writing, through collaborating.
You're listening to the Celebrate Moral Exemplars podcast. Each episode gives you a rare opportunity to look inside the hearts and minds of people who are committed to improving the lives of others. Our intention is to plant a seed in your mind, a seed that may grow one day and cause you to want to emulate, in your own way, the path taken by these moral exemplars. Contact information regarding this episode's guest can be found on our website at www.celebratemoralexemplars.com. And now, back to the interview.
I think you had one that you were telling me about with the string, or
So the string was another beautiful day where the children, I usually have them sitting in a sort of horseshoe shape so they can all see each other and communicate. And this day I brought in a ball of string and passed it through they were blindfolded, and so I passed it through each child's hands, and they were holding the string as I was passing it through. And the tension in their bodies and their, the niggling and the disquiet that was present was evident in this string that was full of tension and being pulled here and there and taut, and not a happy piece of string. And at one point it even snapped. And so I tied it back up, and through this whole process I was just talking to them about what I was seeing, and the energy that was present in the room was physically evident in this piece of string.
So you were describing the string, what you were seeing in the string, to them, who were, they were blindfolded.
Yeah, they were blindfolded and just sensing. And so slowly over, a period of a few minutes, through this conversation, they quietened in their bodies and became much more attentive to what was actually happening, and to the person sitting next to them on either side, and to how the string was feeling in its form. And the transformation was extraordinarily beautiful, the softening and the
It's like a visual representation that really the string provided of this whole shift, didn't it?
Yes, and it was, the attentiveness was evident. And so the string became softer, and they realized that they could sense so much more when they were quieter within themselves, without anger, without any kind of tension or even just not even really being within their bodies. Mm-hmm. So the following week, I brought that piece of string back in, and it had become quite a tangled ball by that stage. And I laid it out on the floor, and in amongst the sort of loops of the string, I put some objects that are really precious to me, things that I have found or been given. Small bones from a little wallaby, dilly bags from some women up north, all sorts of really precious objects. And we had a conversation about what these things are and what value they have, and what does value really mean, and what it means to be given something or to offer something, and incredible, rich conversations. And then they wrote. And by this stage, their understanding of the value of writing and what it can do for them and for people who read is quite powerful. And so this same girl who wrote the koala story wrote this. And this is 1 month later after the koala story.
Okay.
So just 4 sessions, really. 4 weeks. I'm holding something. I'm holding past. I'm holding all the years that passed from then to now. I'm holding the generations as they race past. In milliseconds, I can very clearly see its whole life passing through my hands. Its history, its present, even a bit of its future, how it's going to end up, how noticeable or unnoticeable it will be, how many hands it has passed through. So far, I was the only one who held it properly. I feel something. Somehow, my touch races past the outside, moves through to the real inside of it. It scares me. I want to let it go, but at the same time, I don't. The tension doesn't let me. I try to look back inside it, but I can't. This time, it doesn't let me. Past. I pressure it. I really want to get back inside. So I do. Now it's hollow, almost like I took everything out of it when I squashed it. Almost like I killed it. The generations start flowing again, this time backwards. What have I done? Have I ruined it? Have I broken its heart? I want to apologize, but how? How do I say sorry to something for noticing how extremely valuable it is? In a very weird way, it gets my message. It opens its doors again. It lets me go inside it. I'm still scared.
Beautiful. Amazing transformations.
Yes, really powerful. And they are aware of these transformations within themselves and within the other children. And they hold such high regard for those capacities and for what they can participate in, for what they can create, how they can be active people, contributors to this world.
And how do you think these experiences, how do you think they'll most benefit from them as they get older? What do you hope that they will gain primarily from this that can be help to them as they move forward in their education and their life?
I think from what they say, because a whole lot of questions are raised for me in terms of what happens when all this is opened up for anybody. There's a huge question there in terms of what it brings and how it manifests and what is possible.
It's almost like a responsibility in a way. That
absolutely. But one thing I think through the process, because it is intimate and careful not in a measured way, but in a way of being attentive, is that when they're ready for these things is when they become clear. And so I think it's quite a strengthening thing, and they talk about it in that way. And this girl who wrote these pieces recently, she said that writing makes her optimistic. And for me, that's incredibly important because, we talk about the difficulties in the world in terms of, the abuse of the earth in so many ways. I mean, it might not be phrased in those ways, but we certainly talk about the history and how the Indigenous people cared for this land for more than 70,000 years, and what that means and the significance of those stories and how they are extraordinarily powerful and what they mean for today, and the attention that we need to give to things and what is happening through agricultural practices and all of these. So they're big issues that are to be faced. And so for her to turn around and say that this gives her optimism, I think really encapsulates so much about it, because while we are aware that all this is happening, we can either be left feeling miserable and incapable of change. Helpless. Or we can see that we have power, each in our own way, to better something, to, for ourselves, for each other.
So it's the empowerment. This process gives them an empowering feeling that you feel is going to help them handle the challenges that we all face, that the planet's facing in the future.
And creative capacity is essential. If there's one thing that we're going to need is creative thinkers to be able to observe carefully, to be able to see and sense and understand and have empathy and find solutions that are smart and beautiful.
So at its core, you're helping them. One of the things you're doing is helping them unlock their own creativity. And that is a very useful, powerful thing we all need to do in this day and age.
And so through the process, in terms of the writing, this is one of her more recent pieces.
And what was the exercise before this one?
So this conversation that we've been developing over recent times, very much around their interest in Indigenous plants. So I just brought in a book of the Indigenous Flora of Melbourne, which is, a book that botanists use. It's not a colourful sort of
children's book per se.
Picture book, not at all. Yeah. It's information. And so that just raised a whole lot of questions for them about, well, if these are the Indigenous plants of Melbourne, where are they? And what has happened in the time between where they were ever present to now? And so that has spurred this incredible passion and interest and conversation around the past and the present and how those things relate and what is possible in terms of our everyday. And so we speak a lot about and read books by extraordinary elders like Uncle Max Harrison and Mr. Bruce Pascoe, and those bring a different sort of sense of the world and a very different sense of history to what is taught generally. And so there's a really powerful understanding of the connection to land and what it means for us living in this particular country every day and what we can do as humans. And so that conversation develops week by week, understanding of so many things. And so this is what this young girl wrote. A world germinating with fire, escarpments of our sacred land, a land which awakens feelings that could not return to the interior beauty, the belief that its reflection could gently come back one day, renegades of our own life, sacrificing everything just to ruin it again, value of significance, illusions forming experiences that will never fade away, flapping wings above our head, taking exaggerating routes which change their flow as the years race by. My exhausted eyes forcing themselves to hold back tears, but at the same time desperately want to let the unique water run out. Identification of the lost memories that flash back every time I magnify my land. The deepness that I dive into disappears with every centimetre I fall.
It's poetry, actually.
It is. It's profound, and it's, they...
And these are children, really.
These are, 11 and 12-year-olds,
kids,
yes. And they sit and now they write and it just flows out. It's like the absolute essence of creative capacity. It is in its purest form. And these words just roll out.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It is beautiful to see the young minds exploring new horizons, and you can hear it coming through loud and clear in their writing. Just in closing, Vicky, is there anything that you'd like to suggest to any of us that are trying to teach and help young people every day?
I think, we all are continually learning, and to know that we're no better, we're no smarter, we are equal, and to trust every person's capacity, I think, is so important. And I think there's not enough humor, there's not enough care and love in the way that education happens. It's all far too rigid. We really need to loosen up a little bit. Loosen up a little. And
have a little fun with it.
Yes, and explore. Yeah. We have bodies that are sensory things.
Yeah.
We need to use that. We need to really honor that.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of times if I think back on the teachers that have had the most profound effect on me, humor was definitely a part of it, and how they made it fun, and the exploration and the sharing. So I think those are things we can all take away from this conversation. And I just want to thank you again for spending the time with us today, and I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors with your teaching.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Celebrate Moral Exemplars podcast with Dan Osborne. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, he would love to hear from you. Also, Dan is currently seeking moral exemplars to interview for future podcast episodes. So if you know such a person and would like to see their work acknowledged and promoted, please contact him via the website at www.celebratemoralexemplars.com. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.